אז מי שלא יצא לו להכיר, קוראים לי מישל ואני סטודנטית מקטוביץ פולין, ואני כרגע מבצעת את הסבבים הקליניים שלי פה בארץ בסורוקה. אז נמצאת איתי בעצם נועה רמן, שהיא דירקטור of partnership, ובאמת אני רוצה להודות לכולכם שהגעתם. יש פה נציגות מאוד מאוד יפה, ואני מקווה שהכלים שתקבלו היום מאוד יעזרו לכם גם להתמודד וגם לעשות הסברה. אז אני אעביר בעצם את הדיבור לנועה, וברוכה הבאה אלינו.
תודה רבה שהזמנתם אותנו, את Stand With Us. אני רק נשים share screen. רגע.
אפשר לשאול מי נמצא באירוע הזה? אני יודע שזה UCSF או שזה יותר גדול, לא ברור לנו כאילו מי יוזמן ומי נמצא פה.
אז בעצם אני לא יודעת, אולי דנה או מישל יודעים יותר.
כן, בעצם אנחנו נמצאים עם Stand with Israel, ונועה רמן שהיא הדירקטור של פרטנרשיפ, היא בעצם תעזרים.
סליחה, לא הבנתי את השאלה.
אני רגע אסביר מי האוכלוסייה, כי אני חושבת שזה מה שהוא שאל. בגדול האירוע הזה פתוח ל-Science Abroad וארגון AIMS, שזה ארגון הסטודנטים לרפואה בחו"ל, שהוא עובדים איתנו בשיתוף פעולה. אז יש פה אנשים מכל העולם, גם מארצות הברית וגם מאירופה, שעושים דוקטורט, פוסט דוקטורט, או לומדים רפואה, או עושים פלושיפ ברפואה בחו"ל. יכול להיות, אני חושבת שאולי זה גם קצת יעזור לנועה, אם כל אחד יכתוב בשם, מאיפה הוא בעולם. אז ככה תהיה לנו תמונה יותר רחבה.
אני רק בודקת לראות מאיפה אתם מגיעים. אוסטריה, פלורידה, בולטימור, איטליה, רומא, MIT, ניו יורק, מגיל, לטביה, יייל. אז קודם כל, תודה רבה שלקחתם את הזמן להיות פה. אני יודעת שזה מצב לא קל לכולנו, ואני מקווה שבשעה שיש לנו ביחד אפשר יותר כאילו להסביר על מה שאתם כבר יודעים, אולי בגדול מה קורה בארץ. אני אעביר עוד כמה דברים על כאילו מה אנחנו עושים Stand With Us. אני גם אעבור לאנגלית, כי כמו שאתם שומעים את המבטא שלי, אני במקור אמריקאית, אני עליתי מסן פרנסיסקו, אני בארץ 5 שנים, ואני will just do share screen. All right, so I'm just going to switch to English because it's easier for me. A few words about Stand With Us. Stand With Us is an international nonprofit organization that is based in Los Angeles. Our headquarters are in Los Angeles, but we've grown all over the world. We now have offices in the US, Canada, Brazil, Argentina, South Africa, Holland, UK, and Australia. If we don't have an office in the country that you guys have mentioned, I saw Bulgaria, Latvia, we still have many contacts all over the world that are standing up for Israel in your community, or know someone like the Jewish community that we can connect you to make you feel less alone. The mission of Stand With Us is surrounded around education. We believe that education truly is the road to supporting Israel and fighting and combating anti-Semitism. So what we'll do today, which is different than the presentations that I've been doing throughout the last really 10 days that this war has taken place, is strengthening and giving you guys tools of how can you better have conversations around Israel and what is happening on the ground. As Israelis, you all have your own Israel story. I don't need to tell you that. You guys grew up wherever you did, whether it's the North, the South, and in the last 10 days of how this war has unfolded, we've seen that it's our families and our friends and our brothers and our sisters that have either been impacted as a result of this war or have gone to fight in this war. And I'm saying this in order for you guys to really emphasize to you that when we talk about Israel and our story abroad, even if it's in a few words between people that were in classroom settings or even in clinics or even in the hospital, that people connect to the personal story. People connect to the emotions of what's happening on the ground. So what we're going to explore today is really just that, of how can we debunk the misconceptions that have taken place. I'll leave some time for you guys also to ask some questions, because as we know, the anti-Semitism and the anti-Zionism that exists in UC Berkeley is quite different than the anti-Semitism, anti-Zionism that exists in Johannesburg, South Africa. So I really want to help you guys pinpoint how can you emphasize and really have more productive conversations. Before I go into October 7, I just want to explain a bit about who I am, just for you guys to have some context. Nice to meet you all. My name is Noah Rahman. I'm the Director of Partnerships at Stand With Us. I've been with the organization for about 8 years, and I'm originally from San Francisco, California. One note, if you guys haven't muted yourself already, please go ahead and do so, just because thank you. So I grew up in San Francisco. Both of my parents are Israeli. They've been in the US now for about 40 years, which is pretty remarkable. And they really wanted to give us a better life. My dad fought in the Lebanon War in the 1980s and decided that he didn't want to raise children in a war zone. Here I am. He probably tried to prevent it, but here I am in Israel during these unprecedented times. And I'm sharing you guys with this about my personal story about my parents, because when I was a university student in my undergrad, I studied international relations at Lewis and Clark College, a liberal arts university in Portland, which is where I first experienced anti-Semitism from the left, where people told me that Israel is baby killers, that the IDF should be ashamed of themselves. But as we know, that's not the case, that Israel obviously is, why we have the IDF is because we're defending ourselves. Now, I most recently graduated from Tel Aviv University with a master's in disaster management and humanitarian aid, so we can also go into that. But again, for the focus, this next hour that we have is to emphasize of how can we have more productive conversations. And I started from a personal lens, where October 7th, just about 2 weeks ago, I got married, which is very exciting. My husband went to Palmachim to go surfing. He's a big surfer. I woke up to Tseva Adom in Tel Aviv, which is where we live. And I at first thought it was an ambulance. I wasn't really, just like everyone else, woke up in the center of Israel, not aware of what we were going to get into, while my husband was in Palmachim at 6:30 a.m., arrived as soon as rockets were landing about 10 meters from him. He ran to a bomb shelter on the beach, crowding with everyone else there, and spent 3 hours in Palmachim bomb shelter, to then be screamed at by the Matzil, saying, you guys need to run for your life because there's mechablim al khof. I'm sharing this intensity in order to really emphasize to all of you, to showcase the stories that are from a personal lens that have impacted you, and not only the stories that are being unfolded from what has happened in the South, in Be'eri, in Sderot, Netiv Asara, which is, not only is it maybe some of our family and our friends, but Israelis as a collective are very unified, which is the only Jewish state in the world, which is why we need to showcase that what happened on October 7 was a massacre that took place and was the deadliest day that Israel has ever experienced since its existence. Showcasing, also feel free to take a photo on the screen. These are the most up-to-date numbers. They've just notified Stand With Us is in all of the intel groups of what's happening with Tzal and the news. So feel free also to utilize me as a resource if it comes to news. Now, the timeline that has really unfolded since October 7 and until today, obviously rocket fires all over Israel. It took about 2 days until Israel and the IDF were able to kill the terrorists that were still in Israel's soil. And what we're seeing is the shift in public opinion, where throughout the first couple of days, we saw more empathy maybe towards Israel. And now as the IDF is in its second level of operation, warning that they will do a ground invasion in the Gaza Strip, where right now they're creating a buffer zone. They have evacuated over 30,000 citizens along the Gaza Strip, which is now people are starting to pay attention of, wait a minute, but Israel has turned off its water. How can you be okay with this as an Israeli, being a doctor, for example? So we'll unpack that in a few slides, which then takes me to language. As we know, I'm assuming everyone in this chat speaks more than two languages, Hebrew and English, as you're listening to me educate you in English, is context matters. Context matters, and also words matter. So misinformation and disinformation, it's important to note the difference of it, especially when friends, peers, colleagues, people you admire academically, how they're using this terminology. The first one that I want to emphasize is misinformation, where we're seeing a lot of misinformation being swarmed around maybe our Facebook, our Instagram, Twitter, whatever you utilize. And it could be that one of our friends is reposting something because they're an empathetic person, they're a sensitive person, they see what's happening in Gaza city that doctors have said that they refuse to evacuate as a result of the IDF saying that they want to evacuate, so they're reposting this. So how I would suggest you reaching out to someone who is reposting from a place of misinformation is recognize that they may not have all of the context of what's happening on the ground. So rather than going in and saying, you're wrong about this and you're wrong about that, first, recognize nobody wants to be told they're wrong. They want to be invited to a conversation, and recognize that maybe they're open to having a dialogue with you. Whereas disinformation is information that is published online, again, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, wherever it is, with the malicious intent of creating fake news, deep fake. Fake news is essentially fake news. It's not real news. And deep fake is where you take a video and you either mimic the person who's speaking. There was a famous one with US President Barack Obama, that they completely reworded what his speech was, and it wasn't even him speaking.
Hey Noah, just a second, can I interrupt? Just
sure, please.
שיתוף מסך שלך מסתיר לנו את החלק הימיני של המסך שלך, אז אם את יכולה לשנות, להזיז את זה קצת, כן, תודה.
זה יותר טוב?
כן, כן, פשוט.
מצטערת.
הכל בסדר, תודה רבה.
בכיף. Okay. Some other words that may also come up as you're speaking, where someone says, for example, but Israel's a colonizer. They came in and they kicked out all of the Palestinians living here. Also, context matters, where if someone on an infographic repost something, they don't always have the context. They may not even know that Jews have been indigenous to this land for over 3,500 years. So showcasing the differences. I'll go into the other two examples, apartheid state sanction, later on, just for the purpose of time. 1 second, I'm just going to move this as well. So how to spot fake news. So again, this specific slide may feel self-explanatory, but it's important to note, especially in a time of war, especially in our day and age of the amount of misinformation that is being circulated, is to keep this in mind when you're talking to the people that you're engaging in conversation. First, consider the source. Click on the story, investigate where it's coming from. For example, there was a carousel post going on a couple years ago that says the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is not complicated. It's a matter of ethnic cleansing. To say any conflict around the world is not complicated is just factually incorrect, let alone the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. If we look more in depth with the numbers, we know also ethnic cleansing, there has been a rise and increase of Palestinian population rather than a decrease of Palestinian population. Also investigate the sites, for example, Al Jazeera, their mission, where do they sit, who are they funded by, for example, Qatar. Another thing that I don't need to tell all of you, but important to emphasize here, is to read beyond the headline, where something that is said, even if it's on New York Times, Times of Israel, Haaretz, wherever you're getting your news from, to read what is the whole story even saying, rather than judging it based off of the headline, and connecting to that point of who is the author. It is very credible in today's journalism community to be anti-Israel, the essence of writing stories that are focusing on Israel as the oppressor, oppressing the Palestinians. Why? A couple different reasons have been showcased in the world of journalism. A few of them, one of them to start with, is that it's very inclusive to be anti-Israel, where you can come to Israel, you can sleep in a Tel Aviv hotel right along the Tayelet, drive an hour down to the Gaza Strip, get the photos that you want, and then feel safe enough, rather than being in a war zone in different parts of the world that are way more dangerous. So checking the author, what the credibility. There's even been instances of different newspapers like the New York Times even stating that it's quite difficult to put a story forward that showcases in favor of Israel. Supporting sources, also important. Who are the supporting sources, especially on Instagram and Twitter? People don't always cite the source. So paying attention, or even if a friend posts something or a colleague, asking them, where did you get this from? Checking the date. There is a photo that's currently being circulated that is showcasing a photo from 2013 from the Syrian civil war that is saying that it is actually from Gaza today. Happy to share that with you guys after. Another thing that we see online, especially for people to cope with certain situations, is satire. Sometimes satire is taken too far, as we know, even though with Israeli culture, it's very common to just make jokes about things. But when it comes to the international community, using jokes in good taste, because not everybody will be either sensitive enough or take that joke as reasoning. Others is checking your biases and asking the experts. Asking the experts, at least for Stand With Us, we have a research department that is dedicated to all of the work. Everything that we post online is fact-checked and is verified. Now, when it comes to the world of misinformation, disinformation, what is posted either in traditional media like TV platforms or even social media, Instagram, if there's anything that we're seeing a shift, is that a lot of people for credibility are posting, for example, CNN interviews, which is still showcasing that traditional media is credible. There's a big debate within the world of academic literature whether television will be outdated, but what we're seeing in this current war is that it's not. If anything, it's being validated. But what in the world does that have to do with Israel's story? Well, most people, even most Israelis, most Jews around the world don't even know how to tell Israel's story. So a good place to start when you're talking to people about what's happening about Israel, if they're asking you stories, for example, or claiming statements of colonization, apartheid, first talk about Israel's story, which it really showcases the story of the Jewish people. First, showcasing, as I mentioned previously, that Jews are indigenous to this land. Very important to use this word indigenous, especially in Australia, the United States, South Africa, even across Europe, because most people don't even know that, where they think, oh, Israel was established in 1948, it came in after the Holocaust, and that's it. Whereas, as we know, a part of our history is that Jews throughout generation and generation, whether we even go back to the Persians and the Greeks and the Romans and the Byzantines, and we go on generation after generation of different empires invading our land, that Jews never lost sight of our homeland. That at the end of every Passover Seder, we say Shana Haba b'Yerushalayim for a reason. That the story of Israel is the story of returning, making Aliyah, ascending, this thriving democracy where sometimes we agree and sometimes we disagree. But just like we saw in the last 10 days, Israelis have come together to unify in order to keep our soldiers safe, our civilians safe. And it's important to really emphasize who we are and where we've come from. And that Jews as a collective are looking forward, that we know we're going to get through this, that we know we will keep our civilians safe, and important to emphasize that. Now, when you're having conversations, especially now, it can be quite exhausting, given the fact of what and how people are talking about Israel. People accusing, I can speak for myself, people accusing me of, I got a message from an old friend from undergrad saying, I don't feel safe as a Black woman in the United States. Zionists have more power. First off, saying that Zionists and Jews have more power is a classic anti-Semitic trope. So first, when you're having these conversations, whether they're online or in person, checking in with yourself and saying, wait a minute, can I handle this right now? Am I ready to have this conversation right now? Because everything right now is very raw and ongoing, where we haven't gotten to the end of this post-trauma. We're very much still seeing how things are playing out. And as we're hearing on news, as we're hearing in briefing, that it's the beginning. So first, having the conversations, whether it's one-on-one, but making sure who are you talking to? What is your audience? At Stand With Us, we like to divvy it up into these 3 different categories, whether it's on campus in a university setting, or talking to someone, again, online or in person. So the first one, anti-Zionist. At Stand With Us, we define that as someone who doesn't believe in Israel's right to exist. Why on earth would you engage in this person? A couple different reasons. One, in order to understand what are these anti-Zionists saying about my community. And 2, you don't engage this person for the sake of trying to convince them that they're wrong. Because if you try to convince them that they're wrong, it's like someone engaging you, wait a minute, Israel should give up its territory from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. It's something that anti-Zionists and Zionists can't agree on because of both of their values and stories, narratives. Then we jump over to the other side, Zionists. At Stand With Us, we define this as the liberation movement for the Jewish people, that Jews have this right of self-determination in their ancestral homeland. Important to recognize, and maybe some of you have even heard in your own conversation, that Zionist is a dirty word, that it's derogatory, whereas other individuals who are not Jewish, not Israeli, have never even been to Israel, are defining our identity. So if you feel obviously safe enough to say it, reclaim this word, reclaim what it means to be a Zionist, because as 0.2% of the population around the world, another group of people are defining who we are and what we stand for. Knowing our audience as well, why would we engage in the Zionist community? Firstly, as we know, we put maybe 2 Israelis in the room, and there's like 7 different opinions. Everyone has been glued to the news for the last 10 days, and we watch the news, whether it's channel 12, 13, 14, and you see that there's just an array of different opinions. We engage this community in order to unify what is Israel's story: roots, diaspora, and liberation. And super important to showcase how do we describe Israel's story in these really 3 categories that are digestible for people to understand. The last group of people, which is very much the largest group, are people who are apathetic, misinformed, or uninformed. Apathy. Most people, as we know, I can tell you, at least living in San Francisco, most people don't care about what's happening in Israel, Gaza, because they're more concerned about paying rent, getting into post-grad, or even just taking care of their children. And you know what? That's okay. Just like we don't know what's going on in other conflicts around the world to the degree of detail that we know about Israel and Hamas. However, when you're engaging these individuals, when they know that you're an Israeli, they're more likely to reach out to you because they'll see something on the news, they'll see something on TV. Hey, I heard that there's something going on in Israel. Can you tell me a little bit more about that? Whereas the people who are misinformed and uninformed the same way, talking to them and showcasing from an emotional perspective, this is just classic human behavior, classic human psychology, where if someone knows that there is suffering happening in another place in the world, they won't stand for women, children, babies being massacred and murdered just because they're Jews. So really showcasing how do you connect to Israel? What is your story? And how can you really, in a digestible way, talk about the last 10 days? On one hand, it can be, it's exhausting and I'm not ready to do so, and that's okay. Coming back to my, sorry, was there a question? All right, no worries. I'll just emphasize here again where we talked about the 595. 5% of people are in favor of Israel, 5% of people are anti-Israel, and then there's this 90% of people in the middle, which is how we can really make an impact, spark an interest in what's happening. And it's reclaiming our story of what it means to be a Zionist, what it means to be a Jew, what it means to be an Israeli, and believing in Israel's right to exist as the only Jewish country in the world, Jewish sovereign country as well. So now we start to see all of the anti-Semitism that is coming out from all pockets of the world, where the old anti-Semitism says, no, Jews are evil, demonic, and they kill baby. And this dates back to the Black Plague, where during the Black Plague, the Jews were the only group of people not to get sick as a result of Jewish law, washing their hands. But the anti-Semitic trope was that Jews were poisoning the water wells. That was then recycled during Nazi Germany, where, oh, it's not about Jews as a religion, it's Jews as a race. We need to massacre them. 6 million of them, 6 million of us lost because of anti-Semitism. How is that being played out today? Oh, I'm not anti-Semitic, I'm just anti the Jewish state, which relates right back to anti-Semitism, because anti-Zionism equals anti-Semitism. The only Jewish state in the world, which they say, I'm against the Jewish government, Israel's government, I don't agree with its policies, therefore it has no right to exist. However, wording and language matters. Nobody is talking about other countries and other conflicts around the world and saying they don't have a right to exist like they're talking about Israel. So now how can we define anti-Semitism on a deeper level that maybe we're seeing currently? I like to use the different examples, really the different stories of our Jewish history through Purim anti-Semitism and Hanukkah anti-Semitism. Purim anti-Semitism, just like we know of the story of Purim, which I learned since making Aliyah, that Purim is way more fun than Halloween. The story of Purim, as we know, where Haman said death to the Jews, just like we're seeing right now with Hamas, the Islamic regime in Iran. They're not scared of saying it out loud. They're not scared of preaching it. It's very in our face. Whereas Hanukkah anti-Semitism, what we know with the story of the Greeks invading Israel, or what was then Judea, is that through the story of Hanukkah, they said, no, you guys can stay here. You just need to have a cultural genocide against everything that makes you Jewish. Strip away your culture, your language, your religion, and you can stay put. This is actually a photo from UC Berkeley from when I was a campus coordinator back in San Francisco, when I used to support students on campus, where many progressive groups have no problem saying death to Israel because of its Israeli government policies, which it also then they're painting Magen Davids in Berlin on Jewish shops, which is classic anti-Semitism. But then it gets a little bit more diluted through this terminology known as intersectionality. Maybe some of us has heard it. It's coming from the left in the United States by a woman named Kimberly Crenshaw that coined the term in the 1980s, where as a Black woman, her experience trying to get a job, trying to be a citizen in society is remarkably different. She has a different privilege in society as a result of her skin color and her gender. That is just factually correct. We know that maybe through our own personal experiences, through our children's experiences, our partners, and so forth. The idea of intersectionality and how it intersects with other communities, for example, like Free Palestine, is they've hijacked this narrative where they've said, oh, we stand with intersectionality, we stand with Black Lives Matter, women's rights, every injustice in the world, we're in this fight together. However, what this looks like for the Jewish and Israel community is that we're not welcome because we're white passing and we have power in the Middle East, where that, again, they're taking our story, they're taking our narrative, and they're hijacking it for their own injustices. For example, we see from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. As all of you know, what that would look like is a displacement of all Jews in Israel, where that Jews would no longer be welcome, and that would create a whole new refugee problem. Just like the hijacking of the term apartheid, where in South Africa, it was coined that there is, it was coined in 2005, Israel Apartheid Week, that tried to hijack what the injustices of apartheid in South Africa from 1948 to 1993. There was a white minority ruling a Black majority in South Africa that dictated every aspect of Black life. Whether you wanted to go to school, Black individuals could only go to school until grade 8, 8th grade. It dictated who they could marry, what skin color of who they could marry. There was over 155 laws put into place during apartheid that completely paralyzed an individual who is Black life. And it also turned different tribes in South Africa against each other, which is how they have today, like over 12 different languages. How does this relate to Israel? Well, they've said now that there's an apartheid taking place in Israel. And as we know, as citizens of Israel, that is completely incorrect, that as in our parliament, our Israeli Knesset, there is people of different ethnicities, genders, sexualities, all making up our parliament. And there's also freedom of speech, freedom of religion, and the list continues. But what we've seen and how this has played out on campus is that now Jewish students are being told that they need to represent Israel as ambassadors, which is just not true. And they're doing such a successful job at this by taking a popular narrative, something that could maybe happening in the country that you're currently living in. For example, South Africa being apartheid, in the United States, Israel is occupying Gaza, which, as we know, Israel unilaterally disengaged in 2005. In Australia, it's indigenous rights. The list continues. They're casting Israel as an oppressor because it's easier for many humans to, if you could just mute yourself, whoever is unmuted. I don't want to call you out, but just mute yourself. Trying to avoid. Gal, if you're listening, please mute yourself. Thank you. So casting Israel as an oppressor and then calling for judgment. So it's sort of like this three-step equation. Taking a popular narrative, casting Israel as an oppressor, and then calling for punishment. Punishment being Israel having no right to exist.
No, I'm sorry, one second. You can mute all the participants all together.
Am I a co-host?
I think so. You can on the participants here. Yes, here.
For 24 hours.
1 second, I'm just gonna quickly. 1 second. I'm having a...
I did it, אני עשיתי את זה. רגע, אבל עכשיו גם נועה במיוט.
All good.
Okay.
Can you hear me? Thumbs
Yes.
up?
Thank you.
Okay, great. All right. So we've talked about the Hamas-Israel war. We've talked about what anti-Semitism looks like on the ground and virtually. We've talked about how it looks like on our universities. But how in the world can we reframe this conversation? I listed just a few different examples, and obviously at the end when you guys ask questions, feel free to elaborate on different questions that maybe have come up that you are having a hard time answering. Firstly, this is a method that Stand With Us uses to teach his students, teaches high school students, teaches community members around the world of how can we engage in productive conversation in order to put across what our perspective is in a productive manner. This is also assuming that this individual wants to listen to us. So once you acknowledge the person and what they want to listen, this is the 3-step equation. Keep in mind that people that Stand With Us, one of my best friends that Stand With Us, uses this method also on her husband. And her husband always goes, wait, I know you're arming me. Stop, I know what you're doing. So speaking from experience, speaking from others, it does work. But let's unpack how it works. So first, let's use an example. Dogs are better than cats. So first, you acknowledge what the person's argument is. I can understand your love for cats. You don't have to agree with them. For example, if they're saying, we'll get to a different example, but first, dogs are better than cats. I understand your love for cats. And then you reframe the accusation, turn that accusation around to address the message, giving them context of why dogs are better than cats. Dogs are more loyal. You get to go on walks with them. They're a human's best friend. And you finish them off with a message. Usually when it has to do with Israel and the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, you can finish off one that is positive, like dialogue, peace. One day there will be no more war in Israel and our children won't have to serve in the military and risk their life. And also that dogs also get along with cats, unlike cats get along with dogs. Just a different example. Now,
נועה?
yes, yeah.
יש פה בצ'אט בקשה להשאיר מספיק זמן לשאלות, אז אני לא יודעת עד כמה זמן יש לך במצגת, אבל אם תוכלי להשאיר לנו מספיק זמן לשאול אותך את השאלות הרלוונטיות שמטרידות את האנשים פה.
אין בעיה, יש לי עוד 2 סליידים וסיימתי.
טוב, תודה.
מעולה. אז בגדול דיברנו על colonization, so if someone talks about colonizers and Israel, make sure to showcase indigenous roots just to be mindful of the time. The next one, just 1 second. Next one, Hamas equals free Palestine. As we know, this is one of those questions, like if someone writes free Palestine online, if you want to engage in conversation, they may not be as interested in receiving a whole lecture of Israel unilaterally disengaged, blah, blah, blah. But you could also start this specific one with saying, yeah, I agree, free Palestine from Hamas, showcasing the massacre that took place on October 7th and the tragedies that have impacted Israeli citizens, not only Jews in Israel, also with the hostages that are being held currently in Gaza. And then if you see if this conversation leads to something more, then you can also start to unpack the history of 2005, Israel unilaterally disengaged, 2007, and so forth and so forth. The next one, excessive force. This is, I think, the last slide, and then I'll open it up to questions, or I'll say just a few more things of what you can do on your campus. But excessive force and human rights. Hamas being a terrorist organization is they're not playing by Western rules. They're not even abiding by international law. They don't care about children and babies dying or even putting the expense of their own people, their own citizens up against the front lines. So showcasing and making sure that they're holding Hamas accountable for these actions and that Israel is abiding by all international laws, dropping leaflets 24 hours for evacuation, ensuring that they're abiding every step of the way, just like they also evacuated over 30,000 Israeli citizens on the border of Israel and Gaza. So this, if you want to get more involved, if you want more resources, this is a QR scan that takes us straight to our page. We have a situation room that gives us a list of questions, a list of resources. If people ask you, wait a minute, I want more resources, this is something that you can easily share with them. And then just a last note, in order for you guys to have a call for action before I answer questions in the last minute, is your voice matters. Don't ever let anyone dim your light based off of some stupid Instagram post or something that a professor says, that you are an important person and you have every right to advocate for what you believe in, especially the rights of all citizens living in Israel. For example, if you see a anti-Semitic incident, whether it happens at your home, whether it happens in the classroom, most important thing is to document everything. Stand With Us has a legal department that's based in the United States. We are stronger in the US, but their biggest thing, if you're even based in Paris or in Austria, that you should document everything. And Stand With Us has a global network of pro bono attorneys that can support you. Another thing is writing articles, social media posts, which is just getting your voice out on a virtual classroom in order to dilute the hate. And lastly, organize, whether it's organizing friends to come together to mourn together the atrocities that have taken place, whether it's to organize events just like the one that we're having, that me and educators that Stand With Us are more than happy to speak to your communities. We're not just in Israel, we're all over the world. So it can either be virtual like this one right now or in person. And with that, I leave it to you to ask questions. Thank you so much again for your time. And I really appreciate all the work that you're doing in all the countries in order to save lives in hospital or even outside of hospital settings.
Okay, so do you want to ask questions? Anyone?
I would like to ask a question.
Your name and where you're from.
האמת היא, דרך אגב, אפשר לעבור לעברית אם אתם מעדיפים.
כן, אתם יכולים כאילו לשאול בעברית, יש מצב שאני אענה באנגלית, כי זה פשוט יותר קל לי, אבל
לא מפריע לי, פשוט למען כולם, אני לא יודעת אם מדבר עברית או לא. My name is Talia White, I'm a second year med student here in La Sapienza in Rome. Actually, today I had a conversation with a big ערוץ on Instagram, big page on Instagram, which is for medical students, and he was speaking about the atrocities that were happening in Gaza. I texted him explaining him what's going on in Israel, and he brought up the matter of proportions. Like, do you think that Israel's response is proportionate? Now, for me as an Israeli, obviously I think they need to do a little bit more, but of course I didn't tell him that way. Instead, I asked him, what would you do? And explained him the entire situation, and I confronted him with the everyday question that Israeli life and the Israeli people have to ask themselves every day, what to do with that situation. And I would like to ask you, how can we confront this kind of question that they say, okay, they did this, everything is okay, but there are also innocent civilians in Gaza from their perspective. And how do we confront this?
So it's a question that is also, I'm seeing it on almost every Instagram post that is being blasted out. Depending on the conversation, you can also acknowledge that as an Israeli, I think there should always be more that is being put to save innocent civilians, because they are the ones who are most impacted by this war, that they're getting stuck in the crossfire of a war zone, that it's a tragedy that's taking place. And you can even start that. Let's even do acknowledge, reframe, message. So acknowledging this is a state of war, and it's horrible, the loss of life that is taking place on both sides that are innocent civilians. From a place also to continue the conversation of what can be done from an Israel's perspective, that is the war dilemma that Israel is now facing, is what can Israel do in order to make sure and ensure that this massacre of 1,300 lives that were taken and over 199 citizens of Israel are held hostage will never happen again. So as a result of that, proportionality. Some of the posts that I'm seeing online, people are saying, okay, you want proportionality? Israel's not going to go into Gaza and rape, murder, kill, kidnap the innocent civilians. That's one way you can mention it. You can also mention it that right now, this is what Israel is doing. It's facing an existential dilemma of it. This massacre didn't take place in Germany or in a place in Europe. It took place in Israel's soil, which is an even bigger existential threat to Israel's existence. Hence, Israel being in the Middle East. It's not working with Western societies, Western countries, or in international relations term. Western actors that they can diplomatically talk to. This is Chama rules, where it's I'm showing how strong I am in order to ensure that this will never happen again. Depending on the conversation, if you're online, keeping it shortened, I wouldn't recommend writing a Megillah al ma shekore, ki af echad en lo koach leze. If you're having a conversation that you know someone reached out to you on Instagram or on Facebook and you know the person, I would recommend, having a conversation and having them call you or meet for coffee, because as you know, face to face is way more personal. I hope that clarifies your question.
Yeah, thank you very much.
My pleasure.
So I wanted to ask a question. You're talking a lot about one-on-one conversations, and I think that's important. But what we're experiencing here, I think internationally, is a very weak response from the administration of the university that actually perpetuates some of the narratives around the equivalence between, what Hamas did and Israel's response. So just to give you some examples from our campus, we had
Remind me where you are.
I'm sorry, I'm at University of California, San Francisco, so very close to your
right at home.
Yes.
It's a wonderful school.
Thank you. It's a wonderful school, but it does very poorly on anti-Semitism. So anti-Semitism is not part of our diversity training, for example, which is really amazing. This last week, there was an email that went out from a graduate student to an entire institute that basically justified the events of October 7th as resistance and actually incited to violence and used anti-Semitic tropes, and the administration refused to acknowledge it as hate speech or condemn it, let alone discipline the student. People here are not feeling safe. The administration on Friday, our diversity office from UCSF promoted a Palestinian event that includes speakers, including one of your former professors at Berkeley, who are known for anti-Semitism, incitement to violence, calling for intifada in the US, and this was promoted by our Office of Diversity. So do you have a suggestion for us? Because this message coming from the administration is just being amplified, and it's going to those 90% of people who don't know anything and is basically, supporting the pro-Palestinian, or at least the equivalence, position of, escalating violence on both sides, et cetera, et cetera. Do you have a strategy for dealing with that? Because many people here feel unsafe.
Of course. So firstly, I'm so sorry that you're experiencing that, and I remember experiencing it as a student, where always the Jews were left out of the equation. Regarding specifically helping at your university, UC San Francisco, shoot me an email. I put it in the chat. My colleagues in the US will be able to help you. Right now, they're in the process, before this war broke out, to fight against ethnic studies in all the UC schools, which also leaves out the history of the Jewish people. So shoot me an email rather than answering your question, because I will connect you with the people on the ground over there. That will be super helpful in order to give you step-by-step help and strategy. Okay, next question. I think I saw Noga from Baltimore next.
היי, אז אני בג'ונס הופקינס, אני דוקטורנטית. אני אגיד שאני שנה שלישית, אז אני שנתיים בארצות הברית, ולא נתקלתי בשום גילוי אנטישמיות, והייתי בהרבה כנסים, והרבה סאמר סקולים ודברים, ועכשיו כאילו יש את המקרה בארץ, ואני גם לא הלכתי לקמפוס השבוע כי פחדתי, אבל לא נתקלתי באנטישמיות. ואני פשוט מרגישה שלאף אחד לא אכפת, כאילו המנחה שלי מדהים, חוץ ממנו רק או יהודי, כאילו אף אמריקאי שהוא לא יהודי לא כתב לי כלום. ניסיתי לארגן מפגש הסברה, ואמרתי, גם ניסחתי את זה בצורה מאוד כאילו אנחנו רק נסביר לכם מה קורה, מאוד מאוד לא פוליטי. נרשמו אולי 3 אנשים, לעומת זה כתבתי בקבוצת פייסבוק של האוניברסיטת תל אביב, תוך 5 דקות היו לי, הפייסבוק שלי קרס מרוב מתנדבים שרצו להתנדב להסביר ב2 בבוקר. וכאילו אני אומרת, אני לא רוצה לחנך את העולם שכל אחד יחשוב מה שהוא רוצה, אבל אני כאילו, אני לא יכולה להישאר שקטה כשאני רואה שבן דוד דרגה שנייה שלי חטוף בעזה, ולאף אחד לא אכפת בכלל, זה כאילו, לאוניברסיטה, לאדמיניסטרציה, הם מנסים ככסת"ח, כאילו לשלוח אימיילים, זה פשוט משהו שאני לא יכולה להבין, ואני מרגישה ששנתיים פה הייתה איזושהי הצגה עם הרבה צביעות והרבה דברים כאלה. אז אני לא יודעת, כאילו, לא בא לי לחנך אנשים מצד אחד, אבל מצד שני זה יכול מאוד מאוד לחלחל.
אני מבינה אותך לחלוטין, and you shouldn't be silenced. I think you should keep speaking up. The reality is we're not trying to manipulate people's perspective and trying to brainwash them with how Israel's right. If anything, we're trying to spark an interest of, wait a minute, there is an Israeli perspective that is not being showcased on media at all. I can tell you specifically in the United States, I just saw a poll that was made that 47% of Americans are in favor of Israel's right to defend itself. So what we're seeing currently on social media is not a perspective, specifically to the ones who are in the US, is not a reflection of what is happening within Democrats and Republicans. Now, specific also to Johns Hopkins, I put my email in the chat. Send me an email. We have a campus manager that is based in that area that I can connect you to, that she will also connect you to a larger group of Israelis, Jewish, Zionist community, because at the end of the day, not everyone who's Zionist is Jewish. And she will put you in touch in order to help you organize and also to have people in the room for you guys to be going through this and processing the situation together, because you're not alone. Just like the people in this chat, there was over at one point 90 people in this chat, that there's people all over the world who are hungry for showcasing what is actually happening on the ground. And once you send me an email, I'll connect you to the right people. Don't let anyone dim your light. Don't let anyone feel like you need to be silenced because no one's listening. But the reality is there's so much greater people that we can talk to. We don't need to go viral on Instagram. We just need to make one person hear us out. One person that says, let me look into this. So on a one-by-one level, that's how we get to change the world. Not by standing up and giving a speech at some random protest. Maybe also that, but it's on a one-by-one basis that we can make a collective change.
תודה רבה.
טוב, ראיתי את אביב ואז אורי.
Hi, I'm Aniv. I was it's okay. It's a weird name.
It's a pretty name.
Thank you. I was a postdoctoral fellow at Weill Cornell Medicine in neuroscience, and then now in the past month I've been working in a consulting firm. But I'm still very much in touch with the academic community and the Israeli community as a whole here in New York City. And I just wanted to share with the group that we've started a new initiative that's called When Silence Speaks Volumes. And it's basically aimed at addressing the silence of global corporations in the face of October 7th. And the idea is to promote uniform condemnation of Hamas terror against Israel and the allocation of resources to support Israeli civilians. It's brand new. We just set up the LinkedIn page and Instagram page, so I'm happy to share those. And yeah, and it basically just to really stress that these corporations that we're basically focusing on are ones that did, have something to say about 9/11 and Black Lives Matter and the Ukraine war, but now are staying silent. Like the Coca-Cola company and companies like that. So I just wanted to utilize the stage and tell you about it. And thank you, Noah, for that.
Knowledge is power.
את יכולה לשתף את זה בצ'אט? את העמוד אינסטגרם ולינקדאין? אוקיי, מעולה. תודה.
אני באתי להגיד את זה.
אני עכשיו אעשה.
אוקיי, אורי.
Hi, thank you very much. This was very interesting and actually brings together a lot of what we've heard over the WhatsApp and Facebook and some suggestions. So it's really beautiful to have it concise. So thank you so much, Noah. My name is Uri Weil. I'm a postdoctoral fellow in the Max Planck in Göttingen, Germany. And I want actually, I have like 3 questions, so pick which one. The first one is, do you have any advice on whether any legal actions could be taken in some cases? I'll give you one example. Here in Germany, for example, it's actually illegal to make anti-Semitic statements. So if you have a conversation with someone who's actively being aggressive and making anti-Semitic statements, if you record them, you can take them to court. I don't know how it is in the US, and it would be very interesting to know how it is in every country around the world. Second question I've been really fascinated with, and I cannot get a good answer for, is specifically with the Black Lives Movement group places in the USA, different places. Chicago, I see it in even New York sometimes. It's sometimes individual people and sometimes the whole group are very much pro-Hamas and anti-Israeli. And I'm not saying pro-Palestinian. Some of these people are pro-Hamas on social media, and I just cannot get it. And when you try to talk to these people, they say, "Oh, so you're against Black Lives Matter?" No, I'm all for, you know, diversity. I'm all for Black Lives Matter movement. I think it's amazing what you've done. I'm for you, but I'm just against this huge point that you're taking, and this is not subtle, where you're anti-Israeli, and I don't know how to deal with that.
So let me just answer those 2 because of time. The first one regarding Germany and anti-Semitism. Germany has the hardest laws against anti-Semitism given the Holocaust. So if you do decide to record someone, I know, or I'm assuming also in the US, Israel, and in Germany, you have to let the person know that they're being recorded if you do decide to go that route. You don't in Germany? Oh, wow.
You do. You're right.
You do. Okay. So just make sure that, because then unfortunately your claim isn't held. Regarding Black Lives Matter. So a couple of different things to note about Black Lives Matter is that it is this umbrella organization that now has different sects all over the United States and the world that operate on an individual basis. So for example, a good example is like the Jewish federations that exist in the US and in Israel, or Hillel International, where there's Hillel umbrella, and then there's different Hillel houses all over the US and the world. So Black Lives Matter operates in that same incentive, hence why they have different missions. If you look on their different Black Lives Matter Chicago, Black Lives Matter Detroit, they may have different mission statements. How in the world are they advocating and justifying terrorism? Well, the term terrorism is not a bad word for them. And it's important to look at different Black lives, like activists throughout history, whether you go back to Malcolm X, Nelson Mandela, these individuals were classified as terrorists. So they don't see this term as negative or in the same capacity as we do. In addition to that, to take it a step further, as Hamas classifies themselves as freedom fighters, they see Hamas seeing themselves as freedom fighters the same way that Nelson Mandela in apartheid fought to end apartheid through calling himself a freedom fighter. So this context, and if you, for example, come across an individual who is in favor of Black Lives Matter Chicago and says they're justifying this, make sure that you're engaging in this conversation with an individual who actually wants to listen. If not, it might not make an impact and it might just leave you more frustrated, which is just my 2 cents of engaging these individuals, that you're better off talking to someone else who's seen this and knows, wait a minute, I want to stand behind Black Lives Matter, but they stand for Hamas. So maybe using different terminology to showcase, wait a minute, how are they going about doing this? Hamas is massacring 1,300 people for the sake of freedom. That's not freedom. that's not going to end injustice for the Palestinians. That's not going to create a Palestinian state. So going into those details, which I'm sure you already know. I think we
Thank
have
you so much.
time. My pleasure. I think we have time for one more, but feel free to email me because I'm here as a resource. My email's in the chat. Amichai, I saw your hand next.
Hi, thanks. I'll keep it short. I'm Michai from University of Michigan. I'm a postdoc here. I just want to ask about, most of this was focused on engaging with people who do want to listen. But we've seen, student groups and various individuals who distribute hateful flyers on campus, put up intimidating posters, about how supporting Hamas. And I would love to have resources for how to deal with these things, what we can do with the administration, what we can do with law enforcement, and what we can do with public outreach. So like a sort of steps to take when you have this.
Sure. So a couple just notes for me, because you're based in Michigan. Again, I'm going to connect you to the ones on the ground because there's also a campus manager there that will help you also legally deal with this. But for everyone else who's also experiencing this, make sure to document everything. Document, for example, if there's flyers going around that says death to Israel, death to the Jews, take a photo of that in the main courtyard on campus. Stand with us even if you aren't in the United States. I'm talking about the US because that's where we're the strongest legally. Stand with us also can support you guys in taking it to the administration to hold them accountable. Look what's happening on campus. I, as a Jewish student, do not feel safe. You need to hold this. You need to do something about this. So that's some of the terminology that can be done, because as a university, they need to ensure everyone's safety. So also, that's just like a few liners about that, but reach out to me. Also, this goes for anyone who is experiencing something on campus. They don't feel safe or they see something. Obviously, those that were engaging, I'm just going to end with this. The 595, we could be engaging in a conversation where we think we're talking to someone who is part of that 90% to only learn that they are anti-Zionist, anti-Israel. How do we engage with them? We recognize they're not going to change their mind, but I'm still going to say what I'm going to say, because if I'm talking to this person in a classroom setting where it's this person has a strong opinion, but then we're studying with like 4 other people, still say what you have to say, because those 4 other people may not be pro or anti or anything. They might be pro-unicorn. We don't know, but them hearing an Israeli speak and sharing their opinion will give them a different context that they haven't heard before. Whether you're engaging someone or you see an incident on your campus, make sure, again, document, report, take it to the administration. If you want resources, go to standwithus.com, send me an email if you're not finding certain resources, whether it's about specific points in history. We have booklets, materials. If you want to organize a rally, we also have materials about that. Before you guys go, I just want to send one more link that I think can be helpful for you guys. That is a direct link to our situation room. One second. Oh, here it is. standwithus.com/situation room. So in this link, you'll find all of the context resources that I mentioned before, as well as a timeline chronologically of what has happened in the last 10 days. Regarding everything else, you guys are not alone. We are united in the force that we're together. We're not going anywhere. It's going to be a long couple days, a long couple weeks, but we're together. I'm happy again to do another talk for you guys, like let's say in a couple weeks, if you guys would like. We can go more into the nitty-gritties of how to answer questions, but we are here. Stand With Us is always a resource, no matter where you are in the world. And thank you so much again for your time. עם ישראל חי.
Thank you.
תודה, נועה, היה סופר מעניין.
כיף.
תודה, נועה. Thank you.
בכיף.
שמתי לכם את הכתובת אימייל שלה בצ'אט ואת כל הלינקים שקיבלנו גם בצ'אט. ונועה, אפשר לקבל את המצגת שלך?
אז אני לא יכולה לשלוח לכם את המצגת, אבל אני אשלח לך, כאילו ב-resources stand with the situation room, יש את כל האינפורמציה שם, שזה אפילו יותר digestible, באמת לקרוא to read up on.
בסדר גמור.
אפשר לשתף את ההקלטה של הסמינר?
כן, ברור.
בכיף.
זה אצלי.
אוקיי. תודה.
תודה רבה לכולם, וערב
תודה,
שקט.
ביי ביי לכולם, ערב שקט.